The first person who told me about that house was an alcoholic man who lived at the edge of the old market, where the ramshackle drink stalls stayed open until late at night and people were used to hearing stories no one dared verify. He did not tell it in a theatrical voice, nor did he embellish it with cheap details like chains dragging across the floorboards or glowing red eyes in the dark. He only spoke very softly, as if afraid something was sitting right behind him. If anyone offers to rent you the house at the end of the dirt road near the dried-up ditch, do not refuse immediately. Go in, step through the door, look at the cracked walls, the rotting wooden staircase, the bedroom on the second floor. But no matter how cold you are, how tired you are, how sleepy you are, never, under any circumstances, fall asleep on the bed in that house. I asked why. He did not answer at once. He tipped back his head and drained his cup of liquor, his lips trembling, then held out his right hand for me to see. Around his wrist were dark bruises in the shape of 5 fingers. Old marks sunk in beneath the skin like ink that would never fade. He said those were the traces of the night he had lain on that bed but had been lucky enough to wake before being dragged down. Then he left, leaving the cup rolling in a circle across the table and tipping over, as though his hand no longer had the strength to hold it steady. I am not the kind of person who believes in village ghost tales. I am a writer by trade, someone who hunts strange stories in remote places, partly to make money, partly because curiosity has seeped into my blood. The more a place was rumored to be cursed, the more people claimed others had vanished there, the more it seemed wrapped in something vague and unexplainable, the more I wanted to go. I had walked through abandoned temples, shut down hospitals, houses where people had hanged themselves, tracts of land where the locals swore they heard children crying beneath the earth every night. And every time, once you stripped away the fear, what remained was usually something painfully human: greed, hatred, lies, or madness dressed up as the supernatural. So when I heard of that house, I was not frightened, I was interested. The broker led me there on a gray afternoon, the sky neither sunny nor rainy, the air damp enough for the smell of mud from the dried-up ditch by the road to rise in a sour wave. The house stood apart from the cluster of nearby homes, behind a row of old bamboo that did not stir at all. It was not especially large, just an old 2-story country house built decades ago, its yellow lime-washed walls peeling in patches like the skin of a leper. The roof tiles were crooked, the wooden door dark with age, the hinges rusted, the windows fastened shut from inside. It did not look completely abandoned. The first impression it gave me was not ruin, but persistence, as though someone were still tending to it in secret, still dusting it, still waiting. The broker was a woman in her 50s, with thin lips, narrow eyes, and the habit of never looking directly inside the house. She unlocked the door and immediately stepped back onto the porch. I walked in, and the floor gave a faint creak beneath my shoes. The air inside was colder than the air outside in a way that made no sense. Not the chill of wind but the chill of walls. I made a round of the first floor. The living room, the kitchen, a small empty side room. A few old household items coated in dust. Nothing remarkable, but the longer I stayed, the more I felt troubled by the silence in the house. Empty houses always have their own sounds: roof tiles shifting, rats scratching, wind slipping through cracks. Little groans from the wood like breath. This house had none of that. It was so silent that each step I took sounded like someone else walking behind me. The bedroom on the second floor lay at the end of a narrow hallway. The door half open. The moment I stepped inside, I understood why everyone spoke of only one thing: the bed. The room was filthy, the walls blotched with mold, the ceiling split into cobweb cracks, the windows dim as though filmed over with old sweat. And yet in the center of the room the wooden bed stood impossibly clean. The sheets were ivory white, flat and smooth, without dust. The pillows were arranged neatly. It looked as though someone had just made it hours before. That cleanliness did not make the room more welcoming. It made my skin crawl. In a house being eaten away by time, that bed looked like something foreign to the place, like a wet mouth in the shriveled face of a corpse. The broker remained outside the room and refused to step in. In a hoarse voice she said that if I truly wanted to stay here for a few days to write my article, I could, and the rent was cheap enough because no one competed for it. Then she hesitated, keeping her eyes fixed on the left corner of the wall as though avoiding the bed, and gave me only one warning: at night, whatever you hear, don't answer, and no matter what happens, do not sleep on the bed. I laughed and joked that surely the bed did not eat people. She did not laugh. Her face suddenly turned white, as though she had just remembered something unspeakably horrible. She did not reply. She only thrust the key into my hand and walked away quickly. Almost running from the yard, I stood by the window and watched her pass through the bamboo without looking back even once. Evening fell faster than I expected. In this region, once the sun dropped behind the fields, darkness came all at once. I set up a camera in the living room, placed an audio recorder in the upstairs hallway, checked my flashlight, spare batteries, phone, and notebook. I even spoke loudly on purpose now and then, trying to break the oppressive atmosphere in the house. But my voice sounded strange, as though the walls swallowed part of it before giving it back. When night fully settled, I sat in the second-floor bedroom facing the bed, writing notes and observing. Everything remained still. There were moments when I felt ridiculous for having traveled hundreds of miles just to sit and stare at a bed in a moldy room. Around 9 o'clock I began to feel tired. I had barely slept the night before in order to catch an early coach. The trip had been long, and the air in the house was stifling in a way I could not explain. I went downstairs for water and came back up. I had intended to lay a thin mat on the floor, if only out of respect for the warning, but the floor gave off a deep, icy dampness and smelled so strongly of rot that it made breathing unpleasant. When I tried sitting down there, the cold seemed to pass through my clothes and touch bone. Beside me, the bed remained still, clean, nearly mocking my caution. I told myself that I would not sleep deeply, only lie there and rest for a little while. I even set an alarm to wake me every hour, thinking that I felt reassured. When people want to break a taboo, they are always very good at inventing harmless reasons for themselves. The first time I lay down on it, I was startled by how soft the mattress was compared with the bed's old appearance. It was not lumpy, not foul-smelling, not sunken. It cradled my back just enough. Strangely comfortable, as though the bed remembered exactly the weight of a living body. That feeling unsettled me for an instant, but exhaustion won quickly. I looked up at the cracked ceiling. listened to the digital clock on my phone ticking minute by minute. And at some point I drifted off without knowing when. I woke at 1:47 a.m. because of a very strange sensation. Someone was standing over me. Watching, not the vague instinct anyone might have when alone at night. This feeling was clear and certain enough that I opened my eyes at once. The room lay in a dim gray darkness, with only a little moonlight leaking through the edge of the window. No one was there. The door was still shut. The hallway outside was silent. I lay still for a few seconds, heart hammering from the abrupt waking, then gave a faint, dry laugh at myself. But just as I was about to close my eyes again, I heard a tiny sound right beside my right ear. It was like someone drawing in a long breath through clenched teeth. My whole body went cold and stiff. I did not dare turn my head right away. I only felt, with absolute certainty, that the mattress to my right had just sunk slightly. Very slightly, but enough for my body weight to tilt that way. Something had sat down on the bed. I held my breath and listened. Silence. Then another breath. This one slower, longer, so cold that the rim of my ear went numb. Every rational thought in my head blew apart at once. I snatched up my phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it around the room. The bed was empty. No one. The mattress flat. The door shut. But on the sheet, right where that weight had been, there was a faint hollow, like the mark of a knee that had just lifted away. I sat bolt upright, my back drenched in sweat. The first thing I did was check the camera in the corner of the room. The indicator light was still blinking. I fast-forwarded through the footage, but the screen showed nothing except me sleeping alone in the grainy gray dark. No figure appeared, nothing moved. There was no moment when the mattress visibly sank. Only at the exact minute I jerked upright did the image tremble from my sudden movement. I stood there for a long time. If the sensation had been a dream, why was my ear still cold? If it had been an illusion, why was that hollow still visible in the sheet? I climbed off the bed at once, dragged a chair to the wall, and kept my eyes fixed on the mattress. From then until nearly 3 in the morning, nothing happened. I started to think perhaps I was overtired. I even turned the camera on myself and spoke into it, trying to record my own psychological state in case I later wanted to use my doubts as part of the story. After that I felt thirsty. So I stood up and went to the door. And the instant my hand touched the knob, a knock came from beneath the bed. Not loud, but firm, like something tapping from inside the wood. I spun around. The room fell silent again. A minute later, a second knock. This time I was certain it came from inside the bed itself. Not the floor, not the wall. It sounded like someone trapped in a wooden box, tapping patiently to say they were still there. I stepped backward toward the door, my palms freezing. Knock, knock, knock. 3 in a row. Slow, even, deliberate. I thought of running out of the house then and there. But a foolish thought kept me rooted. Maybe it was only wood contracting in the cold. Maybe a rat trapped in the frame. Maybe if I left now, I would never know the truth. There are times when a person shakes with fear, yet curiosity nails their feet to the ground like a curse. I did not sleep again that night. At dawn I checked everything. There was nothing beneath the bed except darkness and old cobwebs. The bed frame was sealed with thick boards and showed no sign of vermin. I leaned close to smell it and suddenly caught a faint, rancid odor, like old clothes shut up for years in a sealed room, mixed with something sweet and sickening like meat beginning to rot. I jerked back, my heart pounding. From the hallway came a sound like a breath of wind. But when I turned, the air there was as still as ever. I left the house that morning and went to ask around among the nearest neighbors. At first no one wanted to talk. They only shook their heads or found excuses to avoid me. Not until midday did an old woman who sold paper offerings agree to tell me a little. The house, she said, had once belonged to the wealthiest family in the area. The husband traded in timber and was often away. The wife was young and beautiful but rarely seen outside. People whispered that she had conceived many times. But none of her children had lived past 3 months. Each time after giving birth, she would look weaker, and at night the servants heard her singing lullabies upstairs although there was no child in the house. Then, one rainy season, the husband returned from a long journey and found his wife dead in the bed. There were no signs of violence on her body, yet her face was frozen into a look of terror so intense it had distorted her features. The horrible thing was that in the middle of her chest there was a deep bruise, as though someone had knelt there for hours. Not long after she was buried, the husband hanged himself in the backyard. Before he died, he scrawled a single line on the wall: "Do not let anyone sleep on that bed." After that the house changed hands many times, but no one could stay long. I asked whether anyone else had died. The old woman looked at me, lips moving as though weighing whether to tell the truth or keep silent for her own safety. At last she said yes. Some people went mad, others vanished. A young married couple had rented the place after renovating it. The husband slept on the bed one night because he was drunk. In the middle of the night the wife woke and saw him lying on his side with his back toward her. But that back was slowly rising as if someone were pushing up into his body from inside the mattress. She screamed and switched on the light. Her husband was still lying there. Only now his face had turned toward her somehow. His eyes open and staring. His mouth moving as though chewing something invisible. By morning he was dead in hospital. Suffocated. His lungs full of blood even though his throat was completely clear, with no sign of any obstruction. Later they reviewed the security camera they had installed in the room. But at the exact moment he got into bed, the screen dissolved into black static, as if a wet hand had smeared itself across the lens. I should have left the area as soon as I heard that. I know that now. But instead of going, I returned to the house with my mind in turmoil. Frightened and yet strangely excited. There was something about the story that obsessed me. Not because it was supernatural, but because it was too consistent. Too many people. Too many different times. Too many details repeating around the same bed. If it was all invented, who had created a rumor so complete and so durable? I wanted to witness one more night with my own eyes. But this time I swore I would not lie on the bed. That evening I dragged a wooden chair into the corner of the room, spread a jacket over my lap, brewed strong coffee, turned on the camera, and left the night lamp burning dimly. I sat watching the bed from about 3 meters away, determined to stay awake until morning. Around 11, the house remained still. 10 minutes before midnight, drowsiness began to creep over me. But I fought it. At exactly midnight, a noise rose from downstairs, as though the kitchen door had just been shut. I froze and listened. Another sound. Then the faintest footsteps. slow and light, walking from the living room to the staircase. One step at a time. Creak, groan, creak, groan. The old stairs complained beneath something's weight. I pointed the flashlight toward the bedroom door. My throat dry. The footsteps stopped just outside in the hall. Silence. No breathing. No rustle. Only the unmistakable feeling that a presence was standing by the door, pressing its face to the crack to look in. I clenched my teeth, gripped the flashlight, and stepped out to yank the door open. The hallway was empty, but on the edge of the top stair, the thin layer of dust had been pressed into faint damp footprints. Smaller than a man's, long and narrow like a woman's feet. The tracks stopped right at my door and then turned back toward the bed. I looked up, my heart feeling as if someone had crushed it in a fist. The sheet, which had been smooth a moment ago, was now wrinkling in the middle as though something had sat down on it. Not an illusion, I saw it with my own eyes beneath the dim yellow lamp and the white beam of the flashlight. The mattress sank little by little, so slowly it was maddening, as though an invisible body were carefully lowering its full weight onto it. After a few seconds the hollow shifted and lengthened, as though whatever it was were lying down. Every sound in the room vanished. I could hear the blood moving in my ears. Then the left pillow dented of its own accord. An invisible head had settled there. I backed against the wall. My mouth was so dry I could make no sound. From the empty space above the pillow came the tiniest murmur, like lips moving. At first I could not make it out. Then it came again, each time seeming closer though nothing moved. My child. The voice was a woman's. Very thin, very weary, as if issuing from a throat soaked too long in water. My child, go to sleep, sleep well, lie down here. The last words stretched into a hiss through clenched teeth like wind in a bone hollow. The hair on my scalp prickled. I wanted to run, but my legs had turned to stone. Then, from beneath the bed, came a scratching sound. Then another. It sounded like fingernails scraping wood from inside. Slow, patient, drawing long strokes that made my spine crawl. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I pointed the flashlight under the bed. The darkness there was thick as ditch water, swallowing the beam too quickly, making the light seem shorter by inches. And deep in that darkness, something caught the light, not an eye. It was white and long. A fingertip. I stood frozen as that finger slowly curled, pressing up against the underside of the floorboards beneath the bed. Then a second finger appeared. Then a third. Then a fourth. An entire human hand, deathly pale and paper thin, was pushing outward from within, making the wooden underside bulge faintly. Then on the other side of the bed another hand appeared. Both hands scratched and pounded at once, as if someone were trapped in the narrow wooden compartment beneath the mattress and was desperately trying to force their way out. I could not bear it any longer. I bolted from the room, ran down the stairs, nearly breaking my neck as I slipped on a step. I reached the front door and tried to wrench it open, only to realize the bolt had been slid shut from the inside. But I remembered clearly that I had not locked it that way earlier. My hands shook violently as I tried to pull the bolt back. It would not move, as though someone were holding it from the other side. Upstairs, the scratching from the bed abruptly stopped. Then came a sound even more terrible. Bare footsteps on the upstairs floorboards. Not fast, not hurried, slowly crossing the hall from the bedroom toward the stairs. As if whatever it was knew perfectly well I could not escape and was savoring my fear one measured step at a time. I whirled around. No one stood on the landing. But the footsteps kept descending. One stair at a time. Creak, groan, creak, groan. The steps bent and rose again beneath an invisible weight. The air inside the house turned suddenly colder. Cold enough that my breath showed in thin wisps. The sweet, rotten smell from the bed that morning had now spread throughout the first floor. Shaking, I yanked the bolt with both hands. The instant it slid free, a voice spoke right behind the nape of my neck. "Don't leave my child alone." That woman's voice was no longer thin. It was deep, wet, hoarse, and desperate, as if issuing from lungs filled with water. I felt cold breath touch the back of my neck. Without daring to turn, I flung the door open and ran into the yard, sprinting through the bamboo, stumbling, falling, not knowing what I struck until I finally saw the yellow lights of the tea stall at the end of the road and collapsed there retching. The villagers found me near dawn burning with fever. My right wrist covered in purple bruises as if someone had gripped it with terrible force. I remember clearly that nothing had physically touched me. And yet the 5-finger mark showed sharply beneath the skin. Too long. The tips dug in as though trying to pull my bones from the joint. I lay in the old woman's house for 2 days before I improved. In my fever I dreamt over and over of the bed. Not the room, not the house. Only the bed itself floating in an endless darkness. On it lay someone turned away from me. Long wet black hair covering the pillow. And every time I tried to come closer to see the face, that person would begin singing in a voice not meant for the living. "Sleep now, lie down here. Just for a while. Just one sleep, and then you will never have to wake again." On the third day I insisted on returning. Not because I was brave but because the obsession had become a kind of addiction. I knew it was madness. But ever since I fled that night, I could not shake the sense that I had missed an essential piece. I wanted to know what was beneath that bed. A corpse? A hidden compartment? Whatever thing had given so many different people the same kind of terror? This time I prepared more carefully. I bought a crowbar, brought rope, a second camera, left the recorder running continuously. I intended to go only in daylight, pry apart the bed frame, and leave before nightfall. At noon the house was as still as on my first day. Sunlight through the windows did nothing to warm it. I climbed upstairs, entered the bedroom, and stopped short. The bed was no longer perfectly made. The sheet was faintly rumpled at one corner, as though someone had risen from it only minutes before I walked in. One pillow still held the clear impression of a head. I swallowed hard, trying to tell myself it was only wind or that I myself had disturbed it before. But inside I knew one thing. After I fled that night, something had continued using that bed. I wedged the crowbar under the board beneath the mattress. The wood was far harder than it looked. After several hard pries, a panel sprang loose, revealing a pitch-dark cavity inside the bed frame. A wave of sweet rot rushed out, so strong it made me turn aside and retch. It was not exactly the smell of a corpse. It was like a mixture of damp hair, old blood, spoiled milk, and wet cloth gone bad. I pulled up my mask and shone the flashlight inside. At first I could not understand what I was seeing. Beneath the mattress was not the usual empty frame of a bed. but a sealed wooden chamber lined with layers of old cloth, rotted black-brown as though soaked through with bodily fluids. And in the middle of those rags were many small, curved, whitish things. I knelt closer to see, and my whole body locked. They were bones, tiny human bones, fragile, many of them still retaining the shape of infant finger joints. Tangled among them were tufts of long hair, dried hard, tied with red thread gone brown. In one corner of the wooden chamber I saw a round bronze object about the size of a bowl mouth, carved with twisted symbols that were neither Vietnamese script nor ordinary Chinese characters. It had been plastered over with something dark and tar-like, now cracked in places. The instant my flashlight beam touched that object, I heard a faint moan behind me. I whipped around. The bedroom door was shut. I could swear I had left it ajar. The room darkened strangely, as though a cloud had passed over the sun, though outside there was not a breath of wind. The moan came again, clearer this time, from the bed, inside the compartment before me. The long dry hair began to stir. At first it moved only as if touched by a draft. Then it started crawling over itself like a nest of black worms. I jerked backward and dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor and slanted up the side of the bed. In that instant I saw a face lying inside the chamber. It was not a living face. The skin was white and stretched tight to the bones like candle wax over a skull. The eyes were shut, but the lids were so thin I could see the movement of eyeballs rolling underneath. The lips were split, dry, and blackened. Long wet hair clung around the throat. The lower body was hidden beneath rotten cloth and tiny bones. That face slowly opened its eyes. There was no white in them, only two wells of solid darkness. Its mouth parted, not to scream but to smile. A line of thick black fluid oozed from one corner of its lips and dripped onto the bones beneath its chin. Then it spoke, in a voice half like the exhausted woman's whisper from the previous night and half like a drowning infant. "You came home. Didn't you?" I do not remember whether I screamed. I only know instinct hurled me toward the door. But the moment my foot touched the floor, something coiled around my ankle. I went down hard, my chin cracking against the boards. Looking down, I saw strands of black hair slithering out from beneath the bed like living hands, tightening around my leg. They were cold and slick. And the more I struggled, the tighter they squeezed. Behind me came the sound of cloth dragging across wood. The thing in the bed frame was crawling out. I clawed at the floor, dragging myself toward the door. The hair had already wound around my calf and my knee. I twisted, snatched up the crowbar, and hacked wildly downward, cutting a few clumps free. But instantly more strands spilled from beneath the bed. More, faster, as if a whole nest of something lived there on human hair. Then the bedroom door flew open. Not by itself. Someone was standing in the doorway. I looked up and felt my heart stop. It was the broker, but she no longer looked fully human. Her face was ash gray. Her eyes sunken deep, her lips dark, and her legs stood unnaturally still as if nailed to the floor. She looked at me with a twisted pity and said in her hoarse voice, "I told you not to sleep on the bed." I shouted for help. She did not come in. She only shook her head very slowly. It remembers the smell of anyone who has lain there. Once you've slept on it, it will call until it drags you down to take its place. I had no time to understand before something dropped heavily onto the floor behind me. A pale hand rested on my shoulder. The fingers were thin to the point of deformity. The nails long and soft as if soaked in water for days. The cold from that hand passed through my shirt and touched my skin. My whole body locked. The broker stepped back once, her eyes shining as though she might cry. Long ago they used a charm to keep the child, she said, her lips trembling. But what they kept was not the child. It was hunger. It wants a place to sleep. It wants warmth. It wants a mother and a child to stay with it forever. The hand on my shoulder tightened. I heard my bones crack faintly. Then another arm slid across my chest and yanked me backward. Long black wet hair poured over my face like a net. The rotten, bloody smell flooded my nose and mouth. In the darkness of that hair something leaned close to my ear and whispered in a voice as gentle as a lullaby. "Lie down, just for a moment? I'm so cold." I struggled wildly and knocked over the old oil lamp on the table. It smashed on the floor. Oil spread, met a spark from the dying flashlight, and flared into a thin tongue of fire. No one prepares for fire inside a haunted room. But perhaps for that very reason it became the only thing capable of breaking the curse. The flames caught the strands of hair on the floor first. A horrible burnt stench rose with a shriek that was neither from an adult nor a child but from dozens of tiny throats crying at once from inside the walls. The hand on my shoulder jerked once and released me. The coils of hair around my legs spasmed as if shocked. I rolled aside, seized the crowbar, and swung it straight into the face of whatever was covering me. I did not see clearly what I hit, only heard a wet splitting sound like a rotten gourd smashed open. The screaming rose to a pitch sharp enough to split thought. Fire ran up the bed frame, feeding on the rotten cloth inside the chamber. From within, the tiny bones began popping like kernels of corn, while the sound of infants crying swelled into a frenzied chorus. I crawled to the door, dragging numb legs behind me. The broker had vanished from the doorway. Or perhaps she had never stood there in the way living people do. The hall was thick with smoke. I ran down the stairs amid the roar of flames. Breaking wood, crying, laughing, and lullabies all layered together into a single sound enough to drive anyone mad if they listened too long. When I reached the yard, I looked back only once. Through the bedroom window on the second floor, behind the red wash of fire, I saw the silhouette of a woman sitting upright on the burning bed. In her arms she held something small wrapped in cloth. Her face was turned toward me, smiling very gently, like a mother who had at last lulled her child to sleep. But where her eyes should have been, there were only two dark hollows leaking smoke. The villagers arrived when the fire had already spread to the first floor. The house burned for nearly 3 hours before it was extinguished. The wooden bed frame collapsed completely. In the ashes they found many fragments of bone too small and damaged to fully identify, along with a bronze object warped by heat and cracked in two. People said it was an old binding charm, something used to keep the soul of a dead infant in the house so the mother would not lose her mind with grief. But if the ritual was done wrong, or if one insisted on holding on to what was no longer truly one's child, what came back would no longer be a child. It would grow on pain, on milk turned foul, on the broken lullabies of a woman who refused to let go. It would hunger for the warmth of the living, and the bed would become its mouth. I left that area after giving my statement. But the story did not end there. A week later, while staying in a rented room in the city, I woke at 2:13 a.m. to the sensation that the mattress beside me had just sunk. I lived alone. No one else was in the room. I turned on the light at once. Cold sweat breaking out over me. The mattress was flat, but on the sheet, close to the edge of the pillow on the right, there was a long black hair, soaked through as if it had just been wrung from filthy water. I picked it up, and instantly my fingertips smelled of that familiar sweet rot. The next night I heard the knocking again. Cock, 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 from inside the bed frame of the boarding room itself. The night after that, a 17-second audio file appeared on my phone. One I had never recorded. When I played it, I heard only someone whispering a lullaby. Sleep, sleep, my child, and then there will be a place to lie forever. I have changed rooms 3 times. I have thrown away 4 beds. I have tried sleeping on the floor, sleeping in chairs, staying awake for entire nights. But the sensation keeps returning. At exactly 2:13, in any place where there is a bed near me, the right side of the mattress always sinks a little. Sometimes it is in a hotel, sometimes at a friend's house, sometimes only a temporary bed in some roadside room. I no longer dare to sleep deeply. Whenever exhaustion finally drags me under, I dream the same dream. I am lying inside a narrow wooden compartment, under layers of mattress, with wet hair and tiny bones around me. And above me someone is turning over very softly. Every time I wake from that dream, I find 5 finger bruises on my ankle or shoulder. New at first, purple-red, then after a few hours darkening into the old black color of marks that have been there for years. I do not know whether the fire that day freed what was in that bed, or only stripped it of its old shelter so it could cling to the last person who touched it. I do not know whether the broker was truly alive, a restless spirit, or only a fragment of memory the house had preserved to warn those who came later. The only thing I know is that the first warning I heard was not exaggerated by a single word. Some houses do not kill with knives, poison, traps, or intruders at midnight. They kill with something far more familiar, a bed. Clean, soft, inviting, the place where human beings are most defenseless, most obedient, most easily replaced. Sleep is the moment when we are weakest, most yielding, least able to resist being exchanged. And perhaps that is why that thing does not need to chase, to scream, or to show itself in some monstrous form. It only has to lie there and wait for us to grow tired. Wait for us to laugh off the warning. Wait for us to walk over and lay our backs down of our own free will. If you are ever invited into a house far from the neighbors, a house whose former owners died strangely, a house with a second-floor bedroom containing a bed cleaner than anything else around it, a house where people whisper only one prohibition, then remember my words. Do not test how true the rumor is. Do not tell yourself you are only resting for a while. Do not say you are alert enough to wake if anything happens. Because by the time you feel the mattress beside you sink, by the time the freezing breath reaches your ear, by the time the lullaby starts beneath your back, it is already too late. You may still be able to open your eyes. You may still see the ceiling, the window, the darkness in the corners, but the rest of you, the part the bed truly wants, may already have begun sliding down into some narrow wooden chamber long before you noticed. And once it has learned the smell of your warmth, it will not forget. It will come through every bed you lie on. It will sit down beside you first. Very lightly, very patiently. It will wait for you to grow tired. Wait for you to soften. Wait for you to no longer have the strength to stay awake. Then in the final moment before you slip away, you will hear the voice of some strange mother. Gentle in a way so horrifying it makes your blood run cold. Whispering right beside your ear not to be afraid. That it is only sleep. Only lying down. Only trading places with something that has been cold for far too long beneath the bed. And when that moment comes, the most horrible thing will not be that you cannot wake up. It will be that you are still awake. Completely awake. Lying motionless in the thick dark beneath someone else's back. Hearing their heart beating through the mattress right above your head. Hearing them turn over. Hearing them yawn. Hearing them think they are alone. And then waiting for the next person.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.